Okay. An interesting aspect of all this that we kind of touched on implicitly but haven't really gone into in much depth is how you never get anywhere. You know, that one aspect of the myth of spiritual inquiry is you kind of get somewhere, but it's not true. You know, whatever you start with is where you end up. You never actually get anywhere. It doesn't develop. It's all very paradoxical. In one sense, there is a profound revelation and discovery, but the revelation and discovery is of the fact that you never get anywhere. You know, that, oh, this is it. Oh yeah, you know. So you start off and, you know, you look at something and it seems weird, but it never goes beyond that. It doesn't ever get anywhere. It doesn't ever develop into anything. And yet, that's not a failure. That's not a weakness. That is the discovery. That is the revelation. That, oh, this is it. It's this exactly as it is, as it has always been, is it.
To the regular mind and sort of the regular little me, that's enough to just really piss me off. You know, because like the little me wants something.
Well, no, but you get something, but you get the way that is so is not a failure of discovery. It's bona fide discovery. You know, that this here is the infinite unresolvable. And calling it that makes it sound grand, but all that really means is cluelessness. You know, it's like you start from cluelessness and you end up with the verification of that cluelessness as an absolutely self-verifying fact. At first, you know, you're clueless. You think you know something, but you're clueless, and you kind of look into it and you're clueless about what you're doing and where you're going. But after sufficient development, sufficient sensitivity, you get that, oh, no, it is cluelessness.
So you're more of an authority on cluelessness.
Yeah, you become the absolute authority on cluelessness. And not as a claim or as a position or as a philosophy, but as a verifying objective fact, self-verifying objective fact. You know, which is a little bit unexpected in terms of, you know, a naive sort of a mindset of what might be expected or anticipated in this kind of a exploration.
Normal human ego structure doesn't particularly gravitate toward cluelessness. It's acquisition of stuff, insulate and to have one up and to engage and all that. Like cluelessness is usually not on the menu of what.
Yeah. Well, from its point of view, it thinks cluelessness is a weakness, but actually cluelessness is a profound strength. Cluelessness is a great opportunity because it's the ultimate level playing field. It's the ultimate random access because you're not locked into anything in particular, because the cluelessness is not a failing of perception or failing of discovery. Calling it cluelessness is a little bit misleading. It's absolute indeterminacy. You're clueless because there's nothing to pin down. There's nothing to find. So, you know, it's like looking at a cloud looking at, let's say a metaphorical cloud, looking at a cloudiness and trying to pin it down. And so you're looking at it, I can't see what it is. All I see is this cloudiness. And then you get the, oh my God, it is cloudiness. So when you're seeing the cloudiness, you're seeing it. And oh, this is the revelation. This is the discovery. It's fuzziness, it's fogginess, it's cloudiness. It's not anything in particular. And that's actually very empowering and very powerful, even though from the point of view of the analytical ego, it's gamesmanship and it's, one-upmanship and wanting to, acquire, things to impress people with. It doesn't sound like it. But in actuality, the actual implication of it is very empowering and very freeing.
What would keep you from seeing cloudiness is holding on solidly to the belief that there's something other than cloudiness. Exactly. And that is the nature of delusion. The very nature of delusion is that in the midst of this cloudiness, I know there's something there, and I'm going to get to it. And I aspire to get to it, and I'm really a great guy because I'm trying to get to it. And I'm making great strides, and I've actually gotten a little bit. Just don't look too closely. And all of that, chasing a carrot on a string is, ego's whole game. But since what is here is cloudiness, it's all bluster and bravado that can't ever pan out. So as long as you're in that mode, you're just, you're just a rat in a what you call it? Treadmill, wheel, whatever.
It's funny because it seems like, there's this cluelessness or whatever, as far as, getting an idea of the nature of things possibly, or thinking that you can. And then there's this cloudiness as far as, I don't know, mental energy or something like that, and I know that I think the two can get confused because sometimes I think, man, I'm just like too much in a fog today, and you come back to this belief that there were other days when you weren't in a fog and you were doing pretty well. You do say so yourself, you were able to think things through pretty brilliantly and all that jazz. And it's like, I want that again. And it's also with that, I think this idea that you can sort of understand better, you can get the whole deal a little better of what this is. And, you have ups and downs, but I don't know. I'm just thinking that if you just settle into whatever it is, whatever the energy level is on a particular day, that's what it is, any amount of wishing isn't going to make it different. Just go with the flow,
Yeah, and they're all different modes, but the supposition that one is actually superior or inferior to another is just a claim.
And it may offer other things that you hadn't, you can be mellow,
Yeah, no, exactly. Every mode has its upside and its downside, let's say. True.
I can't help but think what a great way to hide something. What a great way to hide something. Like everybody that's looking for it is thinking it's something different than what it is.
What is already here.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
It's like
Yeah.
diabolical.
Yeah, spiritual discovery is very, very surprising because what you find is so different than what you expected.
What about these not so free samples of like, oh, this is it? Like, whoa. What's up with that? They come and they go and.
Well, it's great. It's for real, but it's just it's a mistake to confuse revelation with the impact of revelation. So in other words, you get an insight, and then at the same time there's a reaction to it. Wow, that's so cool by comparison to what wasn't so cool before it or whatever, right? And wow, that's great. But then the wow, that's greatness fades because it's like you throw a pebble in the pond and there's ripples, and then the ripples die out. The pebble's still in the pond, but the ripples aren't there anymore because that reactiveness has potency mainly due to contrast. The condition seems like an oh wow by contrast with what came before it. But then even if that oh wow condition persists, you might not know it because that just becomes a new normalcy, and you sort of recalibrate your normalcy, and then you settle into the dullness of oh wow until the next time. The next pebble hits the pond, and then there's all this agitation. Oh wow, this is so cool.
And that is forever happening?
Sure, absolutely. Cyclically perhaps, or on many different cycles, on many different frequencies, simultaneous, whatever.
So you're always discovering something that you thought was not you that suddenly becomes you, and that is the same for you?
Oh yeah, sure. That's all there is. I'm not special. I'm not different than anyone else. If anything, I just notice it.
But what I mean is your experience is it that you are continually discovering something that you thought was else that you realize, oh, it's also me? Are you in a constant state of that loop?
Well, I don't categorize it in terms of else or me-ness, but it's a continual, startlement of, wow. It's continual, oh wow, or continual little revelations, because moment to moment, every moment's a surprise. Every moment, I don't know what experience is going to look like, and so it's always like, wow, interesting. And it always has its surprising and novel, implications and innuendo and perspective, and that, there's this constant little bubbles. It's like champagne or something where the bubbles are coming up, constant little hits of, and most of the time they're just little effervescence, and sometimes it's a big bubble, a fart, let's say, a champagne fart.
Champagne fart.
Seems to be a little more of a, I don't know.
So are you just experiencing these bubbles within as you?
Sure.
Or is there a sense of you that's maintained all the time who is like, wow, this is, wow, what, like looking out, that stuff is being presented to a sense of you?
I don't categorize it in terms of sense of me or not. It's not like that. There's always a sense of me to whatever extent there is. I don't experience a polarity between me and not me. It's just sure there's meanness here, and there's thisness here, and the thisness and the meanness are just two kind of ways of spinning the same thing. And sometimes there seems to be an emphasis of one or the other relatively, but if I look at that, I can't really find any demarcation. So
And you don't get caught up in the sense of me? Like you don't get caught up in the I'm fucked, I'm a person, I have this problem,
Isn't that sort of
and it's mine?
not well, probably, but I would say not so much. No. I have memories of being very caught up. I used to be like a kind of a narcissistic drama queen. When I think back to when I was a teenager. My whole life was kind of woe is me. Jesus, I wish I was anybody else.
Used to be. It's a little more honest, maybe. She seems to disagree.
Hey, come on here. I'm just reporting how it looks to me. You can tell me how it looks to you. Fair enough. But it's just a matter of emphasis. I think that probably kind of happens to some degree with aging and maturing anyway. Most 17-year-olds I know are pretty much narcissistic drama queens, so no surprise there.
The point is that temperament doesn't have anything to do with anything, so it's kind of irrelevant. Personality, temperament, karma, whatever you want to call it, is just, it's part of the display, so.
Yeah, it's just in the mix.
Separate it?
Yeah.
That seems like aging and a certain amount of time of looking for something that you're just not finding and realizing you're not going to find what you thought you were going to find. But that's like the 1-2 punch of, oh, time to just kind of set it down.
Yeah, which is, aside from classifying that as being just an artifact of aging, that is actual spiritual discovery. I mean, spirituality is not really anything special. It's just the normal process. Life by its very nature tends to be a sinking and a deepening into itself, a learning of itself. And this happens with, one could argue it happens with, perhaps lesser degrees of efficiency in the normal bumbling around life. And then for people who are more, attending to the matter intelligently, perhaps it could happen more efficiently, but it's basically the same thing. The discovery is the same, it's intrinsic. And so, yeah, I mean, that is itself spiritual discovery.
It seems to me there's a whole world of difference between spiritual discovery and religious, whatever, acceptance or religious discovery. And I'm just wondering your take on certain things, like, the Vedas and Buddhism and all that stuff. I mean, you can get a sense of, they all have a part to play in the kinds of things that you're talking about. You can get a sense of that in both, I think. I don't know if I'm making any sense at all. But in Christianity or the Abrahamic religions, whatever, I don't know that that's so true. Do you have a sense of a religiosity compared to spirituality?
Yeah, sure. Well, religious philosophy and religious presentation, in most cases, I would say it tends to be entrenched, long developed spin doctoring over original, like Christ is supposed to have lived, or Buddha's, supposed to have lived, 25 or 27 or however 100 years ago. And, he supposedly said certain things and people supposedly wrote them down, 200 years after he died. So they were just repeating them to each other playing telephone. So God knows how accurate that was. And then it gets written down, and then it gets edited, and then it gets translated, and then it gets edited again, and then So the version that you get now, 3,000 years later, who knows what relationship it bears to the original? And of course, the same with the, with the supposed teachings of Christ and all these other things. The problem, I would say, with most religion is the politics of it, of the fact that all the humans, middlemen that have had their fingers in the pie of manipulating what the presentation is. It's anything is liable to be diluted and complicated, and different people with different agendas, biasing it one way or another, and so on and so forth.
Do you get an impression that there was insight along the same lines that probably just got, maybe some of it came through if you
Certainly. If any of the original teachings of Buddha were at all accurate, the guy, had a sharp perception and, a very insightful experience of things, and pointed out some very interesting aspects of things. And the same could be, speculated of other, major religious figures and so on and so forth. But again, who knows? They obviously had sufficient potency to stimulate all the the hoopla that followed it.
Yeah, but so does Trump.
That's true. But see, again, this points out the nature, the complicated nature of human participation, human politics, is people latch onto a figure or a principle, and then they spin it for their own agenda, and it gets propagated as a cultural meme, as a religion or a political group or a philosophy or whatever. And So trying to separate the wheat from the chaff of, well, what did the originator really, what was up with him? What would they, or they heard? What did they really say versus what's being presented after all the politicization? You know, God knows.
Well, and sometimes it's like, especially like with Christianity, because that's so apt to be so crazy and precise in weird ways. And so you can look through a lot of it and like, this is crap. But then the things like, God saying, what's he say in the burning bush? It's basically another I am that I am.
Sure.
Somewhere. And I'm like, whoa, and I mean, so
Cheers
things
up.
like that it wouldn't just come out, and somebody wouldn't be academically thinking and then say something like that.
No.
That's an inspired thing to say.
Yeah.
In some
Yeah, obviously there was bona fide revelation.
Yeah.
Back in there, in the origins at some point.
Yeah.
And some of it persists in the transmission.
Yeah.
And a lot of it seems to have been watered down and garbled and
Right.
manipulated and politicized and so on and so forth. And again, but with all spiritual or religious or metaphysical teachings, the important thing is not to look at the teachings, but look at what the teachings are supposed to be about.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't matter what someone says. That's trying to get to why they're saying it. What are they talking about?
Where's it leading?
Because it itself cannot be said accurately. As soon as you start saying something, you're encoding it in the semantic system, which is has all sorts of intrinsic inaccuracies just in the structure of language and the supposition that of nouns and verbs and all these other things, which don't actually correlate to the structure of reality. So as soon as you say something, no matter how insightful and precise and ingenious, there's already an inconceivable error built into it.
Right, sure.
So to decode it, you have to depart from what is said and try to get to, well, what are they talking about? And that's what's important, is to get to the objectivity, get to the actual object that is being referred to, rather than the way it's being referred to. Because you can see that when you look at the religions, you get Jesus, these people are talking, no pun intended, these people are talking about, they seem to be talking about apples and oranges. I mean, they're talking about all these different things in different ways, and yet they have to be talking about the same thing. They must be talking about reality, because if they're talking about anything, what else is there to talk about? And reality is what it is. It's not like, the Christians have a reality and the, Jews have another reality and Hindus have another reality and Tibetans have another, it's not like that. It can't be like that. So all of the apparent differences has to get down to semantic differences and differences of translation and the errors that comes in with that. But if you're insightful yourself and the teaching isn't too garbled, you may be able to, like with I am that I am, you may be able to go, oh wow,
Yeah.
and then you gloss over the language that's being used or the actual statement and see what's being. That must be talking about this. That must be talking about being. Being is being, and a statement like "being is being" can sound enormously vague, but actually it's astoundingly precise and comprehensive. When you ignore the vagueness of the language and look at what's the being that's being referred to, and oh yeah, wow. I mean, that's some really juicy shit. I mean, that's bang. That's like there's a whole lot there. You can jump into that and swim around for a long time.
Well, it seems like so much, especially since I grew up in a Christian church. So much of it is Sunday school stuff. I mean, there's really basic, primary, little kid stuff, basically. I mean, and then you have the Bible discussion groups, which I presume are basically going over the same crap, pretty much. But there are these things like, when I was really little, I remember hearing it, whether it was a sermon or whatever, this I am that I am. And I'm like, whoa, what is that? That is wild. I have no idea what, it took some time for me to get a sense of that. But that was one of those open mysteries, it was like a really cool thing. And nobody really spoke to it. I remember somebody saying, he changed it. He said, I am what I am, like Popeye or something like that. I am what I am, and it's like, well, what the hell? That's just sounds stupid, But
Actually, I am that I am is a very good translation of the original Hebrew.
I am that I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a whole lot different to me than I am what I am, which is like, yeah, well, just take me as I am. That's not the meaning of it. That's but there's, I guess what I'm saying is there's these seeds and sprinkled throughout.
Sure.
But you have to be open for it, and the other stuff, I don't know. You just have to say, well, there's all this crap that went into it too.
Well, it is.
Nothing's perfect.
Well, it is. And that's why, people that are really serious about getting into this stuff and exploring it as an issue, like in this kind of a context, the focus is much more on direct experience, and much less on, learning teachings or memorizing Bible phrases or something like that. Because what's being said is not important. It's what it's about that's important, and what it's about is actual and experiential. It's not vague and metaphorical and idealistic or abstract. On the contrary, it's supremely concrete, supremely actual. So as such, it can be explored directly and non-conceptually, and that's where the rubber meets the road. And there are gems in the little kernels within the traditions where that really shines out evidently. That didn't get polluted or diluted or whitewashed away. Fortunately.
How do you read that sentence, I am that I am? What emphasis you put up? What was it, The Secret Book or something? Or some movie talked about we misinterpret those lines, and if you say it a different way, and then it's just the one voice saying I am that. I don't know. How would you read?
Well, I am.
Say that.
Yeah. I am. The self-verifying certainty of my being. I am this. My experience exists. I mean, it's all we've been talking about this weekend. I am.
And when you say I am, are you including everything within my experience? Like
no, of course not.
No, you're including Peter's experience.
That I can include that as a concept within my experience, but if it's not within my experience, it doesn't exist, as far as I can tell.
Right.
So I am.
Yeah.
A simple statement. I am. There's nothing hidden there. There's no hidden complexities or, nothing up the sleeves.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I am. Okay. And then that. So the object, any object is I am. I am that. Or I should say I am this. But I am that. And then I am. So the that goes back to I am. Or another way to look at it is you could look at the that as being kind of transitive. Is transitive the way of putting it? I'm not sure. But anyway, where I am, and then I am is the vehicle whereby I am. So the I amness is doing itself. It's not being done or subsidiary to some external system.
And, the way I look at it is that is the real operative word. I am that I am. That all of a sudden takes this notion of I amness and says there is I amness. So it's not just the I amness within me, but there is just this universal I amness. That's the way I read. So I am that I am. So in a sense, you can almost say there's a slight difference in fullness of the I am. in the first I am and the second I am?
For me, it like strips all meaning. Like you start off something like, oh, I am, and then you can add on like so much stuff like, oh, because my parents were, because this was, or, and, many things will be created or changed because I am, but it just like sort of stops all that. And it's just like, nope, there's just what's here. And that's like the start, the stop, the end. And it's just cuts all the feet out from underneath the whole thing.
Sure. Without negating it. So
Yeah.
I am includes all that, but it's just I am.
But just, as it's seen.
Yeah, it pulls back. It pulls back to being itself, and never going anywhere, never needing to get out of itself. Which echoes everything we've been talking about this weekend. How, if you look, all of your experience happens within your experiential field, within you. The world appears within you. The human race appears within you. Your life appears within you. Your body and the apparition of all bodies appear within you. And you can't, there's no outside. Outside is a notion, a fantasy that can occur within you. So you can have the notion outside, but if you have it, it's a notion occurring within you. So you can't get beyond that. You can't get more than that without going into abstraction. And the abstracting occurs within you, so you still haven't gone anywhere.
But don't you get to a point where you basically say, well, within you, but you can just toss that out. In other words, that becomes sort of meaningless.
Well, it is meaningless, but it's an actual. It's what I am refers to, and what within you refers to, is actual. The way of referring to it as that is completely arbitrary. In other words, this is inclusively this. And this, the actuality of this is what we might call your experiential field for you. For me, it's my experiential field. That's just pragmatism. And anything more than that is theory, which is fine. And it's not necessarily wrong, but it's just abstract speculation within an experiential field. I mean, even calling an experiential field has a complex implication which is liable to be erroneous. Is calling it that sort of shows you where to look for it, but then when you're looking at it, it itself is not in any way limited or explained in any way whatsoever by being called an experiential field. It's just this that is here. Language always gums things up and screws things up because it's, using language to try and indicate reality accurately is like, using nails to try and indicate complex physics properly. It's like it's apples and oranges, they don't correlate. Language has nouns and there are no actual separate objects. Language has verbs and there are no actual separable actions. So you use language and you're using nouns and verbs, which to try to describe something where there's no objects and no action. So, I mean, there's such an inherent disjunction just structurally. You're screwed before you even start. I mean, it's a miracle you can express anything, and at best it's done by, sort of poetic evocation and innuendo and implication,
Is the expression in the experiential field another way to talk about the inclusiveness of this experience?
Sure. I mean, they're all referring, there's only one thing, and so all of those ways are ways of referring to it.
And when you do the the invitation to take a look at sort of the boundaries of the visual field and
Mhm.
look a little closer. That's like taking a look at what is this experiential field?
Sure.
What is this?
Sure. What is it? What is it? You're looking at what is it apparently structurally or quasi-structurally? You know, it's not. You can't map it, but it's not totally devoid of structure because it has these glaringly obvious sort of dimensions that coexist. I mean, just specifically, it has the dimensions of the sense fields, which are all present and coexist strangely. You can't, like, so here's your field of vision, right? This oval. So your field of hearing is here, wherever here is. And where is the field of vision relative to the field of hearing in your experience? You know, you can't say, well, they're close or far, or they're a little bit this way or a little bit that way. It's not a spatiality. They coexist. They don't get in each other's way. They're both within, you know, sort of relatively differentiated textures within the experiential field, but you can't find any kind of a specific structurality that's related to it. And then you look at, well, okay, where's thought happening? Where's the mind? You know, the mind is a presence of some kind of some kind of an actual textural presence. You know, thought has a texture like light has a texture and sound has a texture. That's how you can tell the difference. You can tell a thought's a thought because it feels like a thought. You can tell a vision, sight is sight because it feels like light. You know, they have a texture or a quality that is more or less immediately apparent. So you find thought. Okay, there's thought. Where is it? You know, here's the field of vision. The field of vision is very obvious and sort of it establishes the most obvious spatiality. Where's thought happening with regard to it? You know, they don't get in each other's way. They coexist, but you know, location doesn't really apply. It doesn't have a geometry. It doesn't. You can't actually map it out. You know, the whole thing gets very interesting, and then you begin to notice. You know, but what are they all in? They're all kind of in the same, you know, thing, the same whatever, the same thisness, the same meanness. And then it's possible to notice that, well, there's more than that too, because there's other qualities of experience that I can't qualify or classify as being within any of the sensory fields or being within mind per se. There's other experience of just sort of subtle vibes or subtle whatever, subtle flavors, subtle little zings. I mean, we don't have language for them because you can't refer to them sensorially. And where are they? What's that? And it's just, okay, so there's more dimensions too, you know, and how many? Who knows? How many experiential textures are there? You know, is there any limit? Is there any boundary? And then you try and find the edges of any of these experiential fields, and you can't really find them. They kind of fuzz out, like one of those MCS or paradox drawings where there's angels and the angels get smaller and smaller and smaller to the end. And of course it's physical, so it kind of does have an edge. But if you were actually looking at angels getting smaller and smaller and smaller forever, you'd never get to an end of angels. But still it would just be here. And the visual field's kind of like that, you know. It sort of gets finer and finer and fuzzier and fuzzier, but it never actually stops. You never actually hit a wall or fall off an edge. But still, there is a beyond it because you know, for example, hearing is beyond it. Hearing is not in the field of vision proper. You know, it sort of coexists with it in some strange way. But again, the point of this is not that you can get to the bottom of answering these questions of where these things are, but just asking the question gets you to look at it and, you know, and begin to explore it for yourself and check it out.
Peter? Somebody brought up something on here. Would it be okay to ask?
Sure.
He just wanted to know if you could give him some clarification on what you mean by the use of the word objective.
Objective means not being created through a personal conceptualization
Personal what?
in any simple sense, personal conceptualization.
Right, okay.
Or let's call it personal mental fabrication.
It sounds like it implies absolute.
Yes,
It implies
objective is absolute.
Okay.
Objective turns out to be the only absolute, and in fact, everything turns out to be objective. So it works nicely.
Ooh.
But at first, it does not necessarily appear to be like that.
That's interesting. So instead of it all being subject,
Yeah,
It's all up.
your preference is to say it's all object.
it's more useful. I mean, it's arbitrary. You can, as soon as it's all one thing, you can call that one thing subject as well as object. But calling it either is meaningless without a referent, without a corollary.
Well, when I think of non-duality, I mean, if I can think of the simplest terms, I think of sort of subject. Duality, subject, object, and non-duality. I think it's sort of coming into subject.
No,
And it sounds like you're saying it comes into object.
no. I spin it that way because I think it's more powerful. Because we're by our natural orientation, we tend to be very narcissistic and self-absorbed, and so we're already biasing things towards the subjective side, and the objective side just sort of sits out there and takes care of itself, and just is basically has nothing to do with anything, and that's more powerful. So if one attends more to what's just out there taking care of itself, and then looks around and sees, wow, and can I find anything that's not just out here taking care of
Yeah,
itself?
because it's all out there in a sense. Even
Yeah.
your eyesight and your senses and thoughts and everything.
Everything. So then you get to, what am I really doing? Am I doing anything? Or is everything all this stuff is just appearing? All this weird phenomena are just doing themselves
So
however
it's the
that
subjective
happens.
that drops out.
Yeah, sure. You could say that, but once the subjective drops out, then the objective is meaningless because it's only objective is relative to subjective. And if
Yeah.
there's no subjective, then objective drops out too, and you just have this.
Then you just have objective.
Objective. Or you just have ob.
Awesome.
Yeah, just objective. Right.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, that was great.
But I mean, to me, it's a strategic matter. I emphasize the objective just because we're already so narcissistically emphasizing the subjective, and what do I do about my feelings, and what do I do about this, and what do I do about that, and how do I get out? It's like, okay, great, we've been there, done that. That's a cesspool. That's a tar baby.
Yeah.
You wade into that, you ain't never coming out.
Right.
Whereas the objective, on the contrary, we typically feel more disentangled from, and it's basically just sort of an irrelevancy. It's, well, yeah, it's here, but what's it have to do with me? The wall is here, but these light fixtures are here, but who gives a shit? It's just objectively present.
Yeah.
And then, okay, cool. But check out what objectively present means. And then again, you discover this interesting phenomena that there's nothing but.
So this whole neti thing, which is saying, not this, not that, basically, this is all illusion, nothing really is there. I mean, it almost seems like it's saying the only thing that's there is subjective, but you're kind of turning that around.
Yeah, I see neti more in terms of analytical frameworks because I take it very literally. Neti means not this.
Yeah.
And this is a designation. So, this is a chair, but no, neti, not a chair.
Yeah.
Which isn't negating it, it's just saying it's not a chair.
Oh,
It's like the famous, this is not a pipe. Painting of a pipe, and this is not a pipe. Yeah, it's there, but it's not a pipe. Yeah, it's here, but it's not a chair. Check out what it actually is. So to me, I look at neti as being more
Okay.
relevant in terms of classification
I see.
versus actuality.
All right.
But, that's arbitrary. There's a lot of different ways to spin it.
Okay.
I don't use or employ neti except as a occasional thing to chat about like we're doing now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Is there another nice little gimmicky phrase that would work to help expedite all of this?
Well, there's a lot of good ones. One of the most powerful ones is fuck it. I've talked about that in many different occasions. Another really good phrase is more another.
More and other.
More another.
Yeah.
So whatever you is, just more another.
Yeah.
Without canceling. So it's sort of the opposite of neti.
Yeah.
You're not canceling anything or negating anything. You're in fact opening to more inclusiveness.
That's right. Yeah.
This but more.
No,
It's like sort of the old TV game show thing. But wait, there's more. Show them what's behind curtain number 3.
Jeez. That's good. Yeah.
This person is very happy and grateful to you for exploding his reliance on language. Thank you. Exclamation point, exclamation.
They didn't have to show up in person.
There he is.
Thanks to the miracle of the internet.
Now, if only we could get Scotty to beam him up.
Set up a computer. Objection.
Weird.
I'm giving her all she's got, Captain.
Yeah, Captain.
So it sounds like there's an edge and you've gone over it in a way.
Yeah, well, you go over the edge when you discover there isn't an edge.
There you go. Thank you.
And that's the difference between you and people who haven't. What is the difference between your,
Well, that's a good way to put it. If there is a difference, which I'm not arguing, but if there was a difference, I would say I know there's no edges, and some people may believe that there are edges, and I would recommend to them look closely and see if you can actually find a bona fide edge, see if you can find a bona fide division or a bona fide ending of anything.
Yes, I mean, I look and I frequently can see that there's no edges, but but there's still this question of this voice within this non-edgelessness that doesn't identify as Beth, that identifies as whoever it's identifying at the person. And there's an apparent whole storyline behind that. There seems to be something, like you claim to have, or maybe not you, but other people claim to have a whole separate existence.
Yeah, but that's just a storyline appearing in your existence.
There's no.
That's just a voice.
It's a story. You're saying.
It doesn't matter what the voice says, it's just a voice. The story is just a story. And yes, stories are continually present, voices are continually present. I hear this nagging voice and I think of it as being my wife, but is it really?
I
rest my case.
What turns you
I hear
on in your
something.
head as a female?
Oh boy! Wait till we get home.
See?
Oh God!
I'm hearing this voice again.
If a wife complains in the woods and there's no one there to hear her,
When you say I'm hearing this voice, who are you referring to?
There's no who, just there's a voice present.
Yeah.
I refers to the hearing.
Isn't it even more separate than that? There's a sense of I, there's the hearing, and then there's.
No, because I can't find any separation. There may be a sense of I, but it's sort of a permeative flavor that I can't find boundaries to or edges. As long as there's a sense of I which is over here and there's
Right.
something else over here, I may sense I-ness, but if I look at it as very non-localized and permeative, I may sense voice, but the voice is just present,
Yeah.
you know. So it's not a question of the phenomena, it's a question of that the phenomena don't really matter because they aren't about anything and they aren't discrete and they aren't in any relationship to anything. It's just weird shit present, weird information that happens to be appearing, you know. Think of it as like hallucinations.
Here's a question, just out of curiosity. Does the like feeling of, well, not to suggest that you have had this feeling, but perhaps you had, but for me recently, I've begun to feel like a fraud almost, like someone like gave me like a secret like identity and this, you know, back like this whole like background story, and I've just been like going with it for like decades and just like doing all that nonsense. Like, holy shit, like what have I been doing? You know, it just seems like craziness. Does that, you know, that, what's that?
We suspected that.
Yeah. Does that, you know, parents, you know, ever fade, or do you just always sort of feel like?
It's I mean, that's always there to whatever extent it is, but it sort of ceases in relevance. It has its own sort of autonomy in terms of a kind of an impetus and a parent motivation, but it's not really connected to anything and doesn't really have anything to do with anything. Again, it's a partialized subsystem within this, you know, within all this vastness that doesn't really have a whole lot of importance. I mean, you know, the personalities, you know, there's a whole lot of, you know, basically bullshit within sort of popular spirituality that, you know, the personality, the ego must be killed, the personality must be squashed or negated or turned into plain vanilla or something. But, you know, my opinion, that's hogwash. The personality dies by just being discovered that it's not a personality, it's just a weird, unfathomable energy subsystem appearing within this meta system that one is. And it has its own autonomous, you know, whirlwind ongoing nature, just like any apparent subsystem. And it's you know, it's not connected to anything. It's not about anything. It has no rhyme or reason. You can't sort it out. You can't stop it. You can't start it. But in that sense, it's no different than anything else. And you know, so it just recedes in relevance. Whereas, you know, when you're naive, you sort of think you are that. You know, I am this personality, and who I am is this big problem because this personality has a lot of dysfunctionalities and a lot of, you know, partial talents and partial blind spots and you know, it is a fuck up and I mean whatever, you know. So, and that seems all very important and urgent and juicy and oh my God, what am I going to do about it? But again, in this kind of an inquiry, when all of that sort of, you know, the flavor of it may persist, sure, but it recedes in relevancy and importance. It's not like, you know, the important thing. It's just sort of, well, that's here, and that's kind of a constant in the equation. I mean, it's kind of like it's kind of like being followed around by a stupid pet or something. You know, you have this dog that you can't train or teach anything to, and it's always on your heels. And it's kind of like that, you know, it's always there, but it's like, so who cares, you know? It's like, if it craps on the floor, you clean it up, and otherwise it's not too much of a problem. And the fact that it's sort of dumb is like, okay, so what? It's just a dumb dog.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
And I guess just feeling like you've been bullshitting the whole time is just more of the same like flavor.
Yeah, it's giving it thinking that matters or is important. I mean, in a way, it is bullshit, you know. But you're more regurgitating bullshit that you've been fed than you are bullshitting yourself, because most aspects of that persona are kind of, you know, spun-doctored into existence by all your brainwashing and programming and stuff. So in a way, my personality is bullshit, but it's not really my bullshit. You know, it's my parents' bullshit and my society's bullshit, and my parents' bullshit isn't really their bullshit. It's their parents' I mean, it sort of just the buck keeps passing back, and there's no beginning. You know.
seems to be weird imprinting from various memories. Like I'm really getting some hits on the sun and the wind outside this window. And memories of in Joshua Tree, you sitting in front of the windows with the sun and the wind. It's like, this is weird. There's like some weird thread of, holy shit, I've been here before. And I get that with other things too, after having sat with certain people. What is that? It's like there's imprinting of some kind that just comes back to whisper.
Whatever, who knows? Resonances and echoes and weird synchronicities, you know.
Yeah.
It's kind of what we got. By various degrees.
Can we speak to cumulative? I know you talked about that before, that some of the experiences of this as what it is, or getting closer to it, seems to be cumulative.
Yeah, well, looking at this in terms of a yoga, having the sort of paradigm that this is a yoga where one can develop some degree of sort of sensitivity to this, or some degree of progressive increasing openness to this, you know, or progressive degree of less entanglement with qualifying this inaccurately and so on. The degree to which that seems to be the case, it does seem to be cumulative.
Mm-hmm.
So, in other words, insight is, you could say insight is cumulative. And so insight tends to build on previous insight, which tends to build on previous insight, rather than just sort of being backfires that then revert to your starting point, and then another backfire that reverts to your starting point, and all that. It's not that it's absolutely necessarily that way, but within the paradigm of this is a yoga and this is as an inquiry or an investigation, there can seem to be discovery, and the discovery can seem to be cumulative. So what you discover will tend to build on previous discovery. You know, very much like if you were learning to play piano, you know, what you learn a year from now will be building on what you learn now, and so on and so forth, because, you know, to some extent, one's capacities in engaging with things in different modes, when it become integrated in one's functionality. So in other words, your ability to be with this in a certain way, once you experience it, you sort of own it. You sort of have that available as part of your repertoire to some degree. And so then the next revelation is like a new one that then when you have sufficient familiarity with that becomes incorporated into your repertoire. So, and again, not that it's necessarily actually that way, but from within the paradigm of looking at it in that way, that does seem to be the case. You know, it's always so interesting talking about this stuff, doing the kind of thing we've been doing this weekend, because it's absolutely impossible to present or to talk about accurately. And yet it does seem to be possible to talk about it from within various relative perspectives that are, relatively powerful and evocative and useful to to employ in terms of playing with this stuff, in terms of engaging with it or dancing around with it. But these different, angles of approach or modes of different paradigms of looking at it don't necessarily have anything to do with each other, and they don't coalesce into they aren't parts of a whole that can coalesce into some coherence. Each of them is wrong and inaccurate. It's not, none of them, with any of them, it's not really that way. So everything I've said this weekend is basically wrong. It's basically not actually like that. It's not accurate. It's not true. But it's hopefully sufficiently evocative and sufficiently potent to be useful in provoking and enabling some engagement with and noticing for oneself what is true, which cannot be said, can't be put into language, can't be put into words, because it is itself, it's an actuality, it's the actuality, which doesn't collapse down into nice little sound bites or nice little, verbal phrases. So it's, so it's interesting, to talk about it. We sort of start a train of talk and I present something as a certain mode, relevant mode of the way it is, and then we can discuss it from various angles and all that. Fine, so great, that's useful. But then you can go on to a whole other way of talking about it. It might be completely contrary and even diametrically opposite to the previous way we talked about it, and that's also useful and evocative. So, I mean, it's very curious, the non-integrity of the way this works. I don't mean this by the presentation, I mean this by this actuality that is here, is endlessly fascinating. One of the cardinal aspects of actuality is that it is inherently incoherent. It is inherently, it does not cohere into a neat, findable entity or package or simplicity. It can be said to be supremely simple, but it's supremely simple as an infinite complexity. Which is, okay, what does that mean? I don't know, check it out. And so on and so forth. So it's it's important to remember all of these different ways of playing with it, ways of approaching it are not gospel. They're tricks. They're at best invitations to discover the way in which they're inadequate, to discover the way in which it's not like that. That sounded almost like closing remarks. I don't mean to imply anything by that. I'm just making an observation.
Nan, correct them.
Let's start with opening remarks. Let's see.
One thing I've noticed while dancing with this kind of inquiry is I seem to dwell less on trying to resolve things, figure things out. And at the same time, when I am trying to figure something out, I take a little broader perspective. I expand out from the intense focus of I've got to solve this kind of thing. And it's, I don't know, it's freed up. It's gotten more playful.
That's wonderful, yeah.
As opposed to, I gotta figure this out. I gotta solve this. I gotta get past this. I gotta resolve something. And then I'm reminded about, on one level, a resolution of something or a fault of something is the revelation of something else. Where if you just stay on that one level, it's like, oh, this is a problem. Look, it's out of place. And then on another, it's like, oh God, wow, I could never imagine that.
Mhm.
It's so out of place, but it's so perfect.
Mhm.
And then it dances on in a sense.
Yeah.
But I ask myself, why do I come back to conversations like this? I get some relief actually, from the busy intensity of pursuit of something or other.
Yeah.
Or escape from something.
Sure.
Too.
And there's no limit. I mean, you can revisit this kind of an inquiry, this kind of exploration anytime, and there's always progress. There's always deepening. It's not like there's a bottom. So it's not like, oh, I got it now. Okay, I graduated. I'm out of here. I mean, you can at any point you can declare yourself graduated, and it's all good, because that you can't verify that either. But on the other hand, if you're interested in being with this, there's infinite. There's always more subtlety to play with, to discover, to be revealed, and like we were talking about, it builds on itself, and there's no limit to how much it continues to do so. And everything you say is sign of success. I mean, that's what this is all about, is to not to achieve those conditions, but having those conditions show up in your life as a sign of achieving what there is to achieve, which is settling more into the way this actually is, rather than holding it, kicking and screaming, but the way you're insisting it has to be, which can be more of the sort of neurotic human normalcy that, so many of us are familiar with.
You and Pino Torolo.
Mhm.
I have some memory of you, you saw him at some point, and you both recognized what this was, and that recognized who you were as this, and that there was a recognition of something, some major recognition between you and him.
Uh-huh.
How would you describe that recognition again? Sorry.
Well, I can't say what the essence of it is, but I mean, I can tell you what happened. It was, I was over at his house one day, and I went into the backyard and I looked up into the sky, and I can't describe what happened, but I saw basically very concretely everything we've been playing with here over this weekend. Like in one lump sum, bang, exploding in my face, you might say. And I couldn't believe it. It was like, wow, what the fuck, what is this, what's happening? And was standing there too, and I looked over at him, and I don't remember what I said, but I said something to him, and he just looked at me and nodded, it was palpable that he was completely in sync with that. It was like, oh yeah, of course. And then, we hung out for the rest of that afternoon and talked about different aspects of it that came up, that I was just, things in my mind, whatever. And it was very clear to me that what I had discovered, he lived there. He was right at home in that context, which I sort of had intuited something along those lines, but I didn't really realize, the depth of it, the actuality of it, before I saw this, this astounding, whatever. I mean, it's of course it's impossible to verbalize it.
But there was a he that remained and a you that remained.
Well, it was
enjoying or having the experience.
Sure, as much of a he and as much of a me as there ever was. I mean, it's very interesting because, right now for me, and I'm sure for you too, there's a me, but there's also all this, and all of this is not separate from the me, but talking about all this as being a me is kind of silly and beside the point. Whereas the parts I could talk about as being a me is sort of this little partial aspect that is sort of sitting here in its own space, whatever. So it's sort of a coexistence. It's like talking about a daisy that's growing out of a lawn under the sky, and the sky comes with. So yeah, the daisy's there, but the sky's there too. And it's sort of silly to talk about the sky as being the daisy, but it's all, it sort of comes with, it's all one system. I mean, a simple way to put it is the experiential field is vast. It's huge. Not abstractly, but right now, experience is just this huge, vast space without any edges, most of which is just unfathomable weirdness and darkness and whatever. And there's also this sort of front and center bright spots of the sensory fields and the personality and thought and stuff that's also there. But the whole thing is right here. And the whole thing is this, I could say it's me, and that would be true, it is me. But talking about it as being me in a specific sense is kind of silly, because the me that I could refer to as me, Peter Brown, my personality and stuff, is just sort of here, wherever, is a relatively small aspect of this vastness, which is also here and is also this. I mean, it's that way for everyone. It's a matter of noticing that rather than achieving something that isn't the case now. But as I think the normal human motives to enormously devalue and essentially ignore out of existence all of this background stuff, because we sort of think of it as being noise in the system. And what we focus on is, hey, what's front and center, what's going on, what's what's in it for me, where's the action, and playing whatever game we're playing. And that's, we sort of limit the whole thing down to that. But if you look at the presence of your experience, that sort of layer of things happens, but it's happening in, a vast space, most of which is not that, and most of which has nothing to do with that whatsoever. But it's there too. And we're used to sort of just ignoring it and denying it and censoring it out of existence. It's like, this sort of, there's kind of a background to my experience, but like, so what? I don't pay attention to it. It's boring. There's nothing there. But in actual fact, it is there, and it's not boring. It's weird. It's interesting, and it's real. It's palpably real, as the sort of more foreground stuff that we usually, have front and center in the spotlight.
And in death, the Peter Brown is just a
Well, we'll
word
see.
and a memory or something?
Sure, we'll see,
Or
won't
the
we?
continuing storyline?
Yeah, we'll see, won't we?
Well, I mean, the deaths that have happened in my own life now, those people that used to be sort of sitting more visually present
Yeah,
are now present in a different,
Yeah.
or just a thought or a feeling
Sure.
or something.
but it's like that when you leave a room too. I mean, I fly back west, and you guys are a memory, and I remember.
Right.
I remember Jeff and Beth. Yeah, I remember them well.
They're dead now.
We had some good times. Well, I don't know if you're dead or not. You might have died the day before, and I hadn't heard. Who knows? But you're not. The only way you're present at that time is as a thought, a memory, a feeling, whatever. And then you die, and it's the same thing for someone objectively. What your dying looks like to you, you'll find out. But I think that the isness that is here, the actuality that is here, is beyond space and time. I don't think it's not a byproduct of and dependent upon the existence of the body. It's the other way around. The body is an outgrowth of it.
Right.
And I think when the body dies, it's going to be more or less analogous to going to sleep, in the sense that the body focus of orientation obviously won't be there the way we're used to it being there. But that doesn't mean that existence itself, being itself, presence itself, will cease.
Yeah.
And what happens then, if anything, if that's even a relevant question, will be certainly interesting to check out, I expect.
Well, it's funny that this, sense of being Beth is sort of recurs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And will stop at a certain point.
And it has little mini stops all the time. I mean, you go into deep sleep and it kind of stops.
Yeah.
And you might go into a dream where you're less Beth. You ever had dreams where you're sort of a slightly different persona or even a radically different persona?
Yeah, I leave all the time.
Yeah.
She did that a minute ago.
Yeah.
But it seems to be a recurring movie or something, or
Yeah.
recurring feeling or attachment or a sense of
Yeah, absolutely.
my comes
Yeah,
up.
Sure, yeah,
Beth,
and that's
whatever.
very interesting. What's up with that, I mean, we're all very familiar with that, but again, it's kind of like a movie facade. There's cracks in the facade, it's definitely there and it's definitely that way, but there's inconsistencies and inconstancies that raise some interesting and provocative questions.
Well, this is the most I've ever talked, and it would be interesting if there's a future, like she listens to
If there was such a thing as
it.
time.
Yeah, whatever, I don't know.
That sounded like final words.
Maybe. What time is it? Okay, 10 more minutes.
10 more minutes.
All right.
That
Anybody
was
got something in
semi-final words.
Any comments, any good jokes?
Okay, 10 minutes. Anything that's left hanging, now's your chance.
Otherwise,
Bring it.
bring it on.
I could stand to hear you talk again about the way sleep has changed for you now.
Well,
That's it.
in my experience, I mean, compared to how I used to be, thinking back when I was a kid, my experience is vastly more, I'm aware of my experience being vastly more continuous. I mean, when I sleep, I know I'm sleeping in some sense. I mean, it's not like I'm awake in a simple sense, looking at myself sleeping, but I kind of am. I mean, there's a part of me that knows I'm sleeping. And it's not an awake part of me, but it is definitely sort of present and active part of me. And the same when I'm dreaming. It's not as simple like a lucid dream, like I'm awake in my dreams. But when I'm dreaming, again, there's this same kind of I know I'm dreaming. And I couldn't possibly, sort of just pin down how, it's not like I'm outside the dream looking at it, but it almost is. I mean, I don't know how to put it, but basically my experience has a great deal of continuity. As I go in and out of these various states, I experience them as sort of relatively minor textural changes within an essential continuity. And again, I wouldn't be able to accurately pin down exactly what I mean by that.
No, that communicates a lot.
I mean, I remember, as far as I'm aware, when I was a kid and something, I would go to sleep and I would just go on. I didn't, there was no me. And I mean, anyways, it seems to be different now in its sort of texture and it's the sort of the alertness of the whole thing somehow. I suspect I was always like that, but again, there's just some kind of a internal censorship that hypnotic sort of a thing that sort of cancels it out and makes it not aware. Sort of the way the background of experience gets censored out and is sort of, denied out of existence or just held to be noise in the system. And so it's ignored to the point where one isn't even aware of it, even though it's actually present, I mean, consciousness is such a slippery thing, and particularly awareness to the point of focus is such a slippery thing. It's so amenable to kind of hypnotic suggestion and stuff, external programming and internal programming, where it sort of becomes a self-fulfilling thing where you see things the way the programming it suggests you to see it and seems to the extent of seeming to cancel out anything else, even if there is a something else. It's all, so it's all, it's very weird in terms of, what one's focusing on versus what's actually there. I think I would say by and large, my sense of awareness outside the focus, generically, not considering states of like wake, sleep, and things like that, but I used to be much more single-minded in my focus in my experience. When I experienced sense of focus, as we all know, and I would sort of have very tunnel vision. That would be it, and there was nothing outside the edges. And now, when I have focus, I'm very aware of the field that's outside it is also being present, even if I'm focusing on what's in the focus and attending to it. There's a sort of a palpable inclusion and really kind of a very explicit awareness of what's not in the focus, which there didn't used to be. And the sleep thing is kind of like that too. In a way, it's sort of like the sleep state is sort of in the focus, but that's within something else that is also there that is not particularly asleep or awake. If you subscribe to the theories of subtle bodies, it's almost as if sort of waking and sleep state are sort of happening on lower levels, and there's some higher, more inclusive level that is not in those levels, but is sort of seeing those levels from its own, trans-physical perspective or something. I would be very loath to say that's literally the case, but it could be something like that. And the paradigm of subtle bodies is actually very interesting. It's in terms of playing with experience and looking at things as the sort of physical sensory level, and then there's a more subtle level above that where experience is also sort of a textural level that's pre-sensory, and then another level of that's sort of the level of the texture of where dream images are, which is more tenuous yet, and yet relative to the physical, and yet is very presents with degrees of discreteness. And then you get up to that, and you get into a level of kind of almost looks like constellations or mandalas or something where the forms don't really coalesce into forms. It's more like it's sort of a whole different kind of a apparent structurality present and so on. And then you get up to another level where it becomes more tenuous still, and then you get to a point where using words to try to describe it is gibberish. But I find that not that it's literally true, but I find that very palpable and interesting as a way of playing with experience. You can hang out with people. It's a fun way to play with psychic engagement. You can hang out with people and be aware of their physical presence, and then you can sort of shift gears up to the dream level, and then reach over and touch them on that level and see what the response is like on that level, and so on and so forth on various other levels and too. So that kind of thing can be sort of just an interesting exploration to play with. Again, not that it's literally like that, but
it appears as such.
Yeah, it's a viable paradigm. It's a useful sort of a game structure. Three minutes to 4. As arbitrary deadlines go, that sounds pretty final to me. So 4 o'clock it is. 3 minutes to get in under the wire.
It's all been said.
It's all been said. What else is there to say?
That's right.
Jesus, we went from A to Z and back again, and even made up a few extra letters.
That's right.
I guess to ask one last question, these other like more subtle realms you talked about,
Mhm.
you've experienced these post that realization you talked about earlier.
Sure. It becomes, they become much more actual and accessible post-realization, so to speak, because pre-realization, there's a very heavy-handed hypnotic bias towards physicality as being real and actual, and anything else as being a fantasy. So these other modes, one can play with them, but there's a sort of a hypnotic, intense bias of, oh, I'm just imagining this is nothing, and sort of as a nagging stance that's just sort of omnipresent, continually oppressing the engagement. But once one sees the arbitrariness of all these frames of reference, which is the essence of the vision, you could say, then oh, I get it. Why not? Prove it's not like that. Is the waking state, is the physical state really dominant? It's here, but there's a whole lot here that doesn't seem to be really very directly related to the physical condition. So what's up with that? And then you can play with that, without this kind of internal nagging bias of devaluating it or invalidating it that can happen. And that's that.
All
Finish
right.
line. Thank you all very much for coming. Lovely to see you.
Thank you, Peter.